Hello, everyone, and welcome once again to the Soldiers of Cinema podcast. I, as always, am Clark Coffey. And also, as always, with me is Mr. Cullen McFader. Hey, Cullen,
Hello.
how you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic on this beautiful, overcast, misty day, which is rare for us to get here in Southern California. I'm enjoying it. It's perfect writing weather, so I'm excited to, after we record this, I'm going to sit down next to the fireplace and do some writing.
Nice. Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
The best atmosphere for.
Yeah,
it's mysterious, you know.
It's always. I feel like it's harder to write when it's 80 degrees and sunny every single day. Maybe it's the romantic in me, but I want a foot of snow outside and overcast, and it's too cold to go anywhere. And
when it feels like there's tension in the air,
you just hunker down, and and it's there's nothing to do but write anyway, and you make yourself a hot toddy and sit down. Yeah. Anyway, maybe. But anyway, I'm also glad to be here, with you on what will be episode 43. And I'm really looking forward to hearing more about your film Daylight Again. So, we've done a couple episodes up until this point where we kind of went over some of your preparations for pre-production, and we had another episode where we talked a little bit about the first part of your production, your shooting, and now you've wrapped and you're in post. So we're going to talk a little bit more about your whole process and what you went through, and maybe what you learned, or how things went for the second half of your production, and kind of as you slide into the first parts of post here. So let's jump in. I mean, let's remind everybody, if you would, give us a quick little summary of your film, of the project, of its scope, and its story, just in case people are jumping in here and haven't heard the other two, and then we'll kind of go through what your process has been thus far.
Yeah. So the project, the movie, as you said, is called Daylight Again. It's a very Hitchcock kind of drama thriller. About this character named Maggie, who's kind of reached rock bottom and has nowhere to go, and her family and friends have all kind of disowned her in a way. And then she bumps into her ex from a few years ago, Peter, who, they had kind of a toxic relationship back in the day and did some illegal stuff.
Whoa.
But he kind of offers to, house her and help her kind of get back on her feet. So he brings her up to his house, which is off in the country way up north, and things kind of aren't as they seem. And she sort of realizes that there was a ulterior motive to his reaching out. So
dun, dun, dun.
So again, very Hitchcock. Very I was kind of funny because I rewatched Rebecca. Right before we did our major shoot at the house location, which is one of my favorite Hitchcock movies, and I sort of realized how much I accidentally stole from it, completely subconsciously. The plot itself is super similar to Rebecca, which of course is about a woman who is swept up by a man who she has never dated before in that instance, and goes to his house and finds out all these secrets about him, and that maybe he's not quite as nice as he seems. So it was kind of funny to watch that before I went, and kind of realize oh wow, this is I can tell where my mind kind of went on the inspiration side of things. So it was a year and a half of writing, and pre-production and stuff like that, and then we shot it over the course of about a month and a half, but there were 10 shoot days individually.
Okay.
Originally there were supposed to be 11, but one of them got cut. So there was 10 total shoot days, which is, I'm sure that anybody who has experience in the film industry right now is going first feature in 10 days. There's no way that worked.
Yeah. That's not many days.
I thought the same thing. And everyone I told was good luck, because, a lot of people's first features take years to shoot and get done and stuff. But I hopefully will be able to get into kind of the details of how I planned it and how I scheduled everything.
Well,
So let's talk a little bit about
let's use that. Let's use that then as a segue to talk about how you set things up and what your shoot was like. So, how did you get it done in 10 days? Give us an idea of script length and kind of where you feel or if you've got a target for film length. But what do you think were some of the keys for getting that successfully shot in such a short period of time?
So the script length is 90 pages,
Okay.
and I'm aiming for about 80 to 90 minutes on the film.
Okay.
And I think the biggest key was, during the writing process, knowing that I was directing it, being able to both cut down or alter scenes to make it, easier to shoot. So an example is in an earlier draft, like this, the final set piece of the film took place at night or at dusk or dawn in a forest. And it was this big, like, action, not action in terms of like fight scene, but it was like there was a lot of action, a lot of stunt work and choreography and stuff that had to go into that.
Yeah.
And I was like, there's no way that on this budget, which is, again, it's entirely self-financed, not just by me, but, self-financed by the group of us, that there's no way that I was going to be able to wrap around the infrastructure needed to shoot such a complicated scene out in a forest at dawn.
Yeah.
Like, that's just, those are three things that are like, even a big budget movie would have a hard time pulling that off. So I wound up switching that whole thing to be inside in this cellar, which is a location that we'll talk about once we kind of get onto the actual shoot days themselves. So it was a lot of that. Like, it was a lot of going through the script and being like, that's going to be way too complicated to shoot. So how can I get that scene kind of, or the idea of that scene across, while also making it a much more simple logistic kind of thing to get done. And then the second part of it was also being able to kind of go through the script itself and sort of say, like, okay, what locations need what, who are the actors I need, because I kind of did all of the pre-pro, like the production bio myself as well. So it came down to basically looking at the shot list and getting a really detailed shot list, and actually running through that shot list in the rehearsal and kind of, faking the setups during the rehearsal process that we did, which we spoke about kind of in our first episode.
Right.
And, setting up with a viewfinder, like the shots, and realizing, okay, that actually I can cut out these three shots because that shot kind of covers the whole scene and actually looks really nice, and the blocking can kind of play out naturally in that one setup rather than having to do 6 different shots for a scene.
Yeah.
So it was a lot of kind of cutting things down to their essentials, which not in a way that made it seem like it was like lazy or rushed or anything like that, but rather quite the contrary, so that I could put a lot of effort into as few shots as possible.
Focus.
As opposed to, spreading out so much effort over 50 shots in a scene or something.
Right, which often happens. So
Yeah.
It sounds like, I mean, in the writing process, if not in your first kind of draft, or I mean, not your first draft, but you kind of, it sounds like you took your shooting script and you went through and you even refined that further. Where
Yes,
you
exactly,
said, okay, what are the actual practical limitations? What locations can I get? And even more, these shots, the handful of shots like the one that you described, this is going to be technically quite difficult. I could like kind of put this in a different place or at a different time and make that shot technically much easier for me to actually pull off in such a short amount of time. And then,
I mean, even an example of one of those things too is that there was a location that was supposed to be inside kind of like a hardware store. And I was not getting a response from anywhere. Even when they'd email back and sort of say, hey, do you have any more details about the thing? And of course, again, offering to pay for these locations as well. But just nowhere was responding.
COVID is probably tough. I mean, COVID,
exactly. And so I wound up taking that scene and just setting it outside in a parking lot. And we already had another shoot at a parking lot, which was the scene supposed to be the scene after that scene in the hardware store. And so what that made me, that's actually why it went from 11 to 10 days, because I wound up cutting an entire shoot day out because of the fact that we no longer needed that location of inside the hardware store.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of combined, there was like supposed to initially be 2 scenes. They have a conversation in the hardware store and carry it out into the parking lot. And I just wound up using that entire parking lot to be the setting of the entire scene rather than, which took some rewriting. I rewrote the scene so that it made sense to be out there, and I actually wound up liking that scene and the way that the dialogue kind of progressed in that scene more than had I even shot the scene in the hardware store in the first place. So yeah, again, a lot of things like that, just kind of going like, okay, this location either isn't responding or is going to be, too much work or something like that. And so why don't I just simplify it and kind of combine things and make it more efficient?
And I mean, I think it's important to note too, and because I see this in a lot of shoots, and it sounds like your rehearsal process limited this quite a bit, which is just a ton of coverage. I think
Yes, yeah.
and it seems to me that it's, and I'm really against shooting a lot of coverage, and I know that there are people out there who, they want to get everything from every angle because it makes them feel kind of safer. It's like, okay, if I've got all these angles, if I've got all this coverage, I'm get as wide as possible to as as
Yeah, I
tight as
can cut
possible,
wherever I want. Yeah.
and everything in between. They feel like, okay, I'm giving myself all these options when I get into editing, and I don't actually feel like that's really how that ends up.
No,
I
no.
think what ends up happening is that you're overwhelmed in editing, A, and B, that lack of focus really becomes evident once you start to edit the picture together. You can tell that there wasn't an intensity of focus
Yeah,
and
yeah.
a conscientiousness. So I don't know.
I've even got a perfect example for that
Yeah,
too. Is
yeah.
that so when we were shooting at the restaurant one night, which again, lots of extras and things like that, and props and fake wine and beer and stuff like that. So, like logistically, a more complicated shoot than the earlier ones had been. Probably the first like majorly complicated, lots of kind of infrastructure going into a shoot. Actually having to speak with the location owner and stuff like owner. Who luckily it
Onager
was
is a
actually the
new.
restaurant that I used to bartend at, so it was a little bit of a great way to sneak in there. But there was one scene where I knew that I wanted to have primarily the most of the scene take place in a oneer of just them talking at the table, kind of a very Bong Joon-ho shot where it's like they're very again, it's almost like tableau, like they're choreographed and staged in a way, then the blocking is in a way that like you can see all their faces. They're all kind of sitting on one side of the table and talking to each other that way, as opposed to something where it would be like reverse shot
Right,
at a table. I just liked the look of the kind of back from afar on a really long lens looking over to them and having this whole scene play out. In the shot list though, I had an insert of, or just the master, and then I had the close-ups of each of them so that if something went wrong in the master, I could cut in. But we did the master first, and my assistant director sort of came over and said like, okay, now let's like, what's these, like, how are we going to light the close-ups? And I was looking at the take, and I sort of said like, oh, we don't even need them. Like, I'm happy with that. And I know that if we cut into anything, it's going to interrupt the rhythm of that scene. And so we wound up cutting again 3 shots out of the scene.
Yeah.
Just on the shoot day, because I realized that one master, which was always my plan initially, didn't need any coverage to fill in the blanks or anything like that. It just worked on its own, and the performances were solid. And so I was happy with it, happy enough with it to just go with the master as I had initially planned, and didn't need that extra coverage.
Yeah.
Which again would have just slowed things down, and it would have been pointless because I wouldn't have even used them. So I think you kind of have to, again, you have to be really, you have finite resources, including time, and I think if you use them wisely, then to make shots look good and to make sure the actors are, delivering well and things like that, and like them really nicely, then you're going to have, I think, a better final product than if you just, get so much stuff that it just winds up being jumbled. And, sure, are there, the slight moment of like a continuity error or something like that somewhere in the movie? Probably, but it doesn't really matter at the end of the day because it's 1 second, and I think that you'd have to really be forensically analyzing the movie to actually even notice those types of things.
Right.
Whereas I think what's much more noticeable, again, like you said, is just this kind of like lack of vision or lack of like clear choice of what the shots are, and you're just trying to capture everything so that you can kind of like stitch it together in the edit.
Yeah, absolutely. And it takes confidence, right? I mean, you've got to, because I know, I mean, look, I understand it can be scary, to put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. But, it's, I think that confidence usually pays off. I mean, there's, everything is kind of a balance. And you've got to be sure. Well, I'll be excited to see what you've got. And we could talk a little bit more. I know you're actually kind of starting post, but before we jump to that, let's talk about, you've already mentioned like a handful of different locations. And I know, for people who are kind of just starting out, who are making some of their first films, that's one of the biggest challenges right away are finding locations that you're able to use. Talk to me a little bit about some of the locations that you used and how you went about finding them and how that kind of worked. How were you able to do that on such a low budget?
Yeah, so the first 2 days were just one of them we shot just at my house, which is always, the easiest.
Yeah.
And then there's a exterior scene in a forest that we shot very close to my house. There's a big kind of like forest with a marsh and stuff nearby. So we were able, very much a local kind of, like I knew the locations. I'd been there, I'd shot things there before. So I kind of knew how easy it was to get equipment over there and stuff like that.
Now, did you just steal those exteriors? You just kind of ran out into the
Yeah,
forest
exactly.
and
And
stole
then
them?
like
Yeah.
the scenes in the parking lot, exactly. We just,
Yeah.
I knew what parking lot would be kind of the least busy on a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
And so we just went there and there was, of course, traffic going through, but it kind of added to the location anyway. But there was no issue of like people parking right beside us or something like that.
You never had anybody come up and say, "What are you doing here, young
Yes,
man?"
exactly. Yeah.
Good, yeah.
And then the first kind of major location that was like an actual kind of rental was the restaurant, which, as I said, I used to bartend there. And when I was writing the script, I kind of blocked the scenes in my head in that restaurant. So it was really great that I wound up getting to use it. The lighting was also has always really been really beautiful in that restaurant, because it's a very, there's a lot of light fixtures that are very soft, that are kind of hanging from the ceiling all over the restaurant. So it provides a really soft kind of wraparound lighting versus, some restaurants that are either really dark, or some restaurants that just have really harsh lights that are just in certain areas, and there's not like an even distribution of light. So it made it really easy to light around. And then, again, because of the fact that I bartended there, I was able to easily talk to the owner.
Yeah.
And that is, again, a huge recommendation, is just use what you know, and use,
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to ask for favors from people and stuff like that. And of course, return them. Yeah, so that was kind of the first major location that wasn't, my own, or something that I owned, or something that was kind of stolen outside that didn't really have that was public. And that one went well. That was just again a restaurant scene, so we had extras and stuff like that. And then after that was a cellar scene. So that was one of these scenes that I was kind of concerned about, because again, very specific blocking and very specific needs from the screenplay.
Right. I mean, you
that
had
scene.
stunts and kind of, there was a whole choreographed
And
thing.
there was just even the way that our main character enters the space and exits the space was very specific in the screenplay, and I had a very specific idea in my head.
Right. Now, did you, so the cellar scene, you're going to tell us in a second, maybe I'm jumping the gun here, but did you have the location locked down and then wrote the scene knowing that?
No, so I knew that I would probably have to change it, but I still wrote it specifically anyway, like for a fake location in my head, just kind of like, okay, I kind of want the door to be there, and then another door here, and then the space.
So you imagined a space, and then you went out and you found something that you could make work with.
Yeah, and so but what's funny was that, so there's a lot of great, this is another, piece of advice for anybody who's kind of starting out. There's a lot of great Facebook groups that are just like Film Industry Network Toronto, or wherever you are. I'm sure there's a ton of them for each city. And so I just went there and I sort of said like, hey, I need a location that's sort of like the Silence of the Lambs house, or like the Parasite, bunker basement kind of thing. Like I need something sort of cellar with hallways, basically like a main room and then some tunnels or something.
Kind of mazy, yeah.
I got a few pieces of people saying like, here's this or that or this, and none of them really worked. And then this one guy reached out to me and said like, hey, I'm in Hamilton, which is a very short drive, like a half-hour drive from where I live. And he said like, I've got this location. There's sound stages on the top. It's this old like warehouse, but in the basement it was an old hydro building. So they used to run water through it, and it would power the street lamps. It was so like back in the early 1900s.
Oh wow.
And so I went for a scout. Like I went with one of the people that was working with me. We just kind of went to check it out. And I walk into the space, and it was literally like, block for block, exactly what I had imagined.
It's perfect.
Like
yeah.
I had to change absolutely nothing about what was in the screenplay, which was, kind of insane.
Yeah.
And so I booked that location. And that shoot day was like, without a doubt, the most complicated, because again, that was the day that we had to have like makeup. We had to have, there was like a lot of, the lighting had to be very specific because we're in this cellar. And so we needed like 200 feet of extension cords to get light down there.
Yeah.
I had to make sure that the lenses were fast enough to actually capture, a dark space like that, and
Yeah.
had to bring like a haze machine so that it filled the space, and that there was a bunch of props. There was, very complicated set dressing to make it just look like the space that I wanted to look like. So yeah, without a doubt, that was the most challenging day. But even that went really, really smoothly.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more in detail about that. Let
Yeah,
me
sure.
ask you, because I think sometimes, it might help some people who are, again, in the process of putting together their own first films, or they're kind of coming up against these challenges. So talk to me a little bit about how you negotiated the rental of that space. Was it difficult? Did you, just tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it was basically, I went, and I think their rate was $100 an hour, or you could do 1,000 for the full day.
So they were kind of set up like they had. It sounds
Yeah,
like
they had fees, but then they also you were able to negotiate if your budget was lower.
Okay.
To pay less.
Okay.
So I wound up kind of negotiating down a little bit. But then what was funny was that I showed up. So that was also the day that, again, nothing really majorly went wrong. But it was actually kind of turned out to be a little bit lucky for that location. So I had booked the location in April, and the shoot day was at the end of July. So there was a few months between me actually going to the location and then the shoot day. And so I show up on the shoot day, and I had talked to the owners a few days or a few weeks in advance of it, and sort of just asked them questions and stuff. And then suddenly they kind of stopped responding, and it was kind of odd. And I was like, well, I hope that they're just busy, because I definitely need this location. And I've got actors that are actually hired out to come. I've got a makeup artist that I've hired, so let's hope that they're just busy. So we show up on the day, and the door was locked and the place was empty. Mm-mm. And so I was like, oh no, like let's just hope that I just have to call somebody or something. And so I call, and the guy that I was arranging, kind of like my contact at the place, was out of town, but luckily he was able to pick up his phone. And so he just gave me the code for the lockbox, and so I could get the key and open everything up and get in there. But I think what had happened was actually that he had forgotten to actually schedule me in. So I think that he'd completely forgotten, and luckily it only took like 5 minutes to actually get all that figured out. But because of that, he wound up like just basically giving it to me free of charge, because he was like, my bad.
Whoa.
So I wound up getting the location for free, which was
my gosh,
great.
That's
and
amazing.
But then we get in, and it's like a big warehouse soundstage type thing, so we could actually pull our cars into the actual building. And I locked my keys in my car, which had all of the equipment, all the sound equipment,
gosh.
the camera, everything. So it was like 2 things in a row were just like, oh, great. But again, luckily that was resolved within 10 minutes. We called CAA, which is, basically AAA here. Mm-hmm. And they opened my door, and it was all fine. And those 2 things for that day were the biggest things that went wrong. Everything else went, incredibly smoothly. But again, to talk about scheduling, so there's kind of 2 sections of the scene. There's the scenes that take place in the tunnels, and then there's the scenes that takes place in the cellar. And they're actually 2 separate parts of the building, so you couldn't actually film right through into the one location from the other. But I knew that the one actor was going to be alone in the tunnel scenes, and she was the one that needed the light makeup, and the other actor needed heavier makeup. So basically, again, like just to talk about efficiency of scheduling, we got there at 9. The first actor, we probably didn't get set up until about 10, ready to shoot. The lead actress, she gets her makeup. And then we got the other guy in the makeup chair to get the more intense makeup for him. And while he was getting his makeup, which was going to take about 2 hours, we were down getting all the shots in the tunnels because he wasn't needed. Then by that point, we'd wrapped. We took about 2 hours in the tunnels to get all the stuff that we needed down there. And lots of like dollies and some kind of cool effects lighting and stuff like that down there. And then we finished that about 12:30, got lunch, and then we had the rest of the day to actually do the major scene in the cellar. So we basically, again, it was kind of this, like, it seems very simple, but it's one of those things that's just kind of like, okay, while he's in his makeup chair, we don't need him for any of these scenes. Let's go get those scenes, finish those, lunch, then move on to the more complicated stuff.
Well, let me ask. I mean, I know, it's, I think you said you had a 6 crew total, and I know you funded it yourself, very low budget. you wrote it, you directed it. Did you also build the schedule? Did you line produce?
I did all the scheduling and everything myself.
Okay.
And just because I knew that I wanted to wrap my head around it and kind of know at every moment, like it was really, really helpful for any time something kind of like couldn't be done at that time, and I could sort of go like, oh well, I know that we're gonna have this location later that time, so let's just get this other bit here, and then we can go back to that after, and it's really easy. Whereas I think if I didn't do the schedule myself or like wasn't as familiar with it, there'd be a lot of situations where it's kind of like, oh, something went wrong, and now I need to figure out what to do, as opposed to just being able to, in a split second, know exactly where we can go from a certain place if something is unavailable or whatever.
Did you have an AD or somebody there to help keep you
yes,
on
so I had one AD who he kind of controlled the shot list and like kept track of time and stuff like that. And so he had the schedule, of course.
So you did have a little bit of help there, but I mean, it's a lot to take on. Did you find that to be, I mean, it's a lot to hold in your head. I mean, you're right. There's definitely a benefit to having all of that information and being so intimately involved in it. But that's also got to be a lot, you're worried about getting the shot. You're working with actors. You're dealing with whatever issues come up, like the two examples you just said. I mean, look, no amount of planning can
negate
negate anything from happening, right? So you're having to. I mean, it's a major problem. I mean, I think it's easy to forget sometimes that directing, I think, is really it's at least as much about solving random weird problems that it is about
the creative side.
The creative side, totally.
Well, no, and I think that for me, the way I think about it is like I don't really compartmentalize things.
Yeah.
So like I get on and, working with the actors or setting up the shot or the lighting, it's all to me just like one task.
Yeah.
So knowing that schedule and stuff like that, like to me, that's still just like, it's not necessarily jumbled up in my head of like, I have to like think about this now and then this and then this and then now I'm working with the actors. It just comes quite natural to be able to go like, oh, I'm kind of doing it all simultaneously. Like I'm like able to set up the shot while speaking with the actors, while kind of like, checking the lighting and kind of building this thing. And the other thing about that is keeping your crew really informed as well. So because of the fact that like I would, was really, really, I would say heavy-handed with the communication of the crew and making sure that they knew what we were doing, what the shots were, everything, what the schedule was like that day, what scenes we were shooting. What
tell me more. Like when you said heavy-handed, like what do you mean? You mean
so just lots of emails of like our shoot days tomorrow. Here is the schedule. Like here's the scenes we're shooting there. Here's the pages of the script that scene's going to be. Here's what the lighting setup is going to be, and kind of sent them like overhead diagrams of light or whatever. So that way, even if I'm busy with an actor, I can sort of say, yeah, this is actually going to be like setup 6.
Yeah.
So all they have to do is look at it, and then I can go over, check it, kind of say, yep, that's good, that works. Or if I need to shift something a little bit, I could do that. But yeah, it was. I can see how it would get very out of hand on like larger films, especially if you're like talking about something with like a huge amount of extras or like big larger, set pieces.
Or even union limitations. If you've got larger crew and you're a union now, there are literally like rules as to what you can and can't do, and that can get pretty specific. But and that's where I think. It's still good to be hands-on, but you can start to delegate, and then you're kind of you're passing that detailed, explicit communication through to your department heads, as opposed to every single individual in the crew.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But it sounds like, but that is one of the benefits of working so small. I mean, a lot of times we talk about the limitations, but one of the benefits of working so small is that you can be intimate. You put together a team of people and you empower them to do a lot of things, and you can have this kind of holistic approach where everybody knows everything that's going on, and you're aware of every aspect of the process, and so you're much more nimble in that way, because everything is kind of right here in your head at that moment.
And it's even things like writing the production Bible and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which is a huge hundreds of pages of stuff in a binder. But being able to do that to me wasn't like a task. It wasn't something that I was like, oh man, now I've got to do this and I've got to schedule all this and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
It was very much just like a step in the process, and really helped me wrap my head around everything in a much clearer way, so that when I was scheduling, when I was shot listing and kind of transferring the shot list into the schedule, because basically I had a master shot list that was the chronological order of the shots in the film, kind of like an editor's list. And then I had the shot lists, divided up into their locations and scenes and things like that, so that, on a day I could just pull out, okay, here's the shots that we're shooting this day at this location. And being able to do that and kind of know, like, there was a lot of times when I'd scheduled or put things in those smaller shot lists and then realized, like, oh, that actually isn't going to work there, because in this scene we've got to put like a blood effect on somebody, and then the scene after that he doesn't have the blood effect, so I should probably put the blood effect at the end of the day so that we can get all that stuff done, rather than having to change out of costumes and change back into something that doesn't have the blood on it or whatever. It wound up making it, again, way easier to kind of figure things out like that I think, had I not been so hands-on with it, would have missed, and would have just kind of, they would have slipped under the radar.
Well, and it sounds to me like you worked at a, to be perfectly honest, it sounds like you worked at a higher level of planning, preparation, and detail than most productions at this budget level. I at least in my experience, like 99.9% is where you're at with your strategy, your planning, your preparation for films this budget, which is likely why that's a huge part of why you succeeded, why you're able to shoot 90 pages in 10 days and have really good looking stuff come out of it.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the thing, is that, like, there's, for me, rather than thinking that it's like I'm wearing 100 hats and I'm trying to get the cinematography to look good while I'm also trying to get the performances there, I think, again, being able to do that all on, like, again, not to say that it was all on my own, because I had tons of help from like a really, really great crew. But being able to, again, kind of be perhaps in charge of scheduling all that and writing it out and actually, figuring it out in my head, to me, again, kind of made it like an amalgam, as opposed to, oh, the cinematography is suffering because I'm working with the actors. I was able to kind of go like, no, it's all one. Like, I'm looking at this as though it's the film. And so I know that when she delivers her line like this, I want the lighting to be like that, and I want the camera to move like that. And it's kind of like that way of thinking about it, as opposed to, again, kind of sectioning things off and sort of going like, okay, this is what the lighting is going to look like here. I'm going to work on that for a half hour, and then I'm going to go over and talk to the actors, and then I'm going to go over and kind of get the camera figured out and stuff like that. And so, there was also, another thing was my assistant director. I have a wireless video monitor. And so he was able to be on an iPad the whole time, watching the shots as they played out. And so while I was, if I was like working on performance, he could easily say like, hey, you can actually see the camera and the reflection in that shot for a second, or that actor in the background looked at the camera for a second, so let's retake that. And so he was kind of the logistical guy that was able to, look at a shot and sort of, rather than like on the creative side of it, of like, oh, does it look good? Is it lit well? He was able to sort of point out the things that I might miss, just because of the fact that I'm so focused on kind of the more creative stuff.
Well, and that's a really good thing to point out. I think that this is a really interesting suggestion, little tip or trick here, real quick. Let's focus on this, that, especially, you're directing, you're also operating. That's a lot to put on someone's shoulders, no pun intended. In the moment, it is, right? Because you're having to manage all the technical aspects and right, you're pulling focus too. You're doing everything, right? I'm assuming it's not like you had a camera tech, you didn't have a focus puller, you're doing everything yourself. That's a lot to keep track of. And then to also be watching, paying attention to performances, paying attention to, you've got the edit in your head, or kind of what you imagine the edit to be, what came before, what came after, how is this going to cut in? Now you're like, all the technical aspects of everything that could kind of go wrong. To have a second set of eyes is really vital, and I'm sure that saved your butt probably in numerous times, I'm guessing, where he caught. Let's talk about sound a little bit too, because we've not touched on that. And specifically, I'm kind of interested in talking about a particular piece of gear that I know you used that I think is pretty amazing for filmmakers, and that is the Zoom F6. And I think you and I are actually both using that at this very moment, are we not, to record our own audio for this. But what's unique about this device at its price point is that it is a 32-bit machine. And tell me a little bit about your experience using that for the shoot. And did that, and let me back up a little bit and say that in a nutshell, one of the benefits of 32-bit is that basically its dynamic range is substantially greater than something that shoots at 16 or 24. And it almost totally eliminates clipping issues that you might have, which are a real problem when you have huge differences in volume, basically, from a performer or from anything that you're recording, actually. So it often happens that you can have a take ruined because either it was recorded at too low of a volume or too high of a volume and clips.
And then it clips, yeah.
And it can be a real challenge to keep that at the sweet spot while you're recording. So tell me a little bit about that. I'm curious. How did that go?
Well, it's fantastic, and even just specifically for performances, because and so my good friend Evan was the location sound. He's also doing the post sound.
Yeah.
But he's a very talented boom operator and sound recordist. So he's quite good at getting levels correct and stuff like that.
Right.
But when it comes to performances for actors, there's one scene in particular that's like an argument in the bedroom, and the volumes, like there's very soft talking and then shouting and stuff like that. And what was great about the 32-bit float was the fact that I was able to do that. He looked at me and said, "Oh, that clipped on that one line, but we know we can recover it."
Yeah.
So that and it's actually, the line is actually in the trailer itself, which was released a few days ago. If you just look up Daylight again trailer, it should be on YouTube.
Yeah. And maybe we can find a way to link that. Yeah, but I mean, literally, it's almost like magic. It's almost like
so
magic.
When I was editing it before, because I of course didn't do the sound for the trailer, that was also Evan.
Yeah.
But I was able to just drop that shot into the trailer clips, like it was a really bad clip.
Yeah.
And it sounds completely fine in the trailer. It sounds like as though the audio was recorded at the right level the whole time. And so it's very much for anybody who perhaps knows like kind of what dynamic range is in sense of a camera, or if you're recording in a raw format on a camera where it's like you can essentially choose the level of gain after the fact, because it records at every level. So it's recording. So the file sizes are of course bigger, but you're simultaneously both recording the highest, the mids, the lows on a spectrum, which is kind of, again, the evolution from older devices, which used to just kind of record one high, one low, and so you kind of had a 2-track to choose from. But even then, there could still be issues with that. Sometimes they would both clip, and you're kind of SOL. But this thing is, it's a really, really workable, like just the workability in post with these files is insane. Just what you can do. I could right now scream into this microphone. I won't, but I could.
Thank you for not doing that.
And we could quite easily
pull it down.
That. Yeah. Even if it was right in the red, it was completely peaked. Yeah. Like losing, when it gets all chippy and stuff.
The data is actually still there. Yeah, the data is actually still there. And I think, for people when you have a small team, you've got a small crew, you've got maybe one guy who's operating boom, and he's also monitoring and adjusting levels and everything. I mean, it's
on 3 different tracks too, with the boom and 3 2 lavs. So.
Absolutely. And it's inevitable that you're going to have clipping, that you're going to have levels that are just not matched perfectly to what's going on. And, especially too, if you have actors who are a little bit less experienced, they're not acting from a perspective of, okay, I need to be careful for the sound. I need to be, they don't have that kind of thing in mind necessarily because they don't have a lot of experience. So they're and
even for professional actors, it can be very freeing to not have to worry about.
Oh my God!
Too.
Well, I was going to say, and even right, and in spite of all of that, I mean, to be freed up to just go ahead and go for it. Saves a lot of takes. And, okay, cool. Well,
it's the other thing too is like it's not. There are cheaper sound recorders out there. You could get one for 8 times cheaper than what this is. This is about, at least in Canada, it was about $800,
which is not bad at all.
Which is not bad but that's what I mean is that it's almost worth that amount of money. Yeah, which is not expensive by by industry standards.
It's very cheap.
But I would say definitely worth that because you're going to save your butt so many times. Yeah, working on a budget crew where, again, like you said, the sound recordist is having to watch 3 separate tracks and also make sure the microphone is pointed the right way. Like, right?
It'll literally save your cost in shooting fee, just in the shooting cost, you will recoup your money many times over with this thing. Anyway, we're not sponsored by Zoom, so everybody, this is totally objective. We don't have any sponsors.
It's just honestly fantastic. Yeah.
It's just a device. It's a piece of gear that I've recently acquired. I have not gone out in the field yet and shot with it, so I was just excited to see what Cullen's experience was, and sounds like it was awesome. So I can't wait to use it on my own projects coming up.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. I mean, was there anything else that you wanted to kind of talk about with your production?
Well, I mean, so again, it was
any lessons learned, or
like, again, I can share another, because I keep saying that like nothing really went wrong, and there were a few things that. So when we got to the location for the house, if you live in Toronto area, you probably know Muskoka, which is about 3 hours north of Toronto, and there's definitely towns and things like that, so it's not impossible to. There's modern infrastructure, but it is, you're out in the forest by a lake, so it's not like you can just run out the door in 2 minutes and get to a Best Buy and something like that.
Right.
But what I realized when we got there was we forgot the XLR cable.
Oops.
So we had labs on the actors.
Wait,
thankfully.
hold on, let me back up. The XLR cable?
Yes,
you only had
XLR
one?
Well, that's the thing is because I thought that we have two, but I had assumed that the one that was hanging was packed. I thought that was the backup, and I thought that I'd packed one, and then forgot to put the one that was hanging on my door into the bag. And so we get up there, and then we're like, oh damn. So we spent like a day. We basically, one of the days was only lav audio. Wound up again working okay because the F6 is so dynamic, and it was also a pretty low dialogue day. It was a lot of just movement and stuff like that, which of course can also be very vital to have a boom to capture those things. But we had backup mics that were kind of less good than a boom, but still something to just kind of get scratch audio. But we wound up having to basically find this like AV store that was like a 45-minute drive away. It was the only place that we could find that was selling XLR cables, and so we sent one of the
PAs,
one of my friends just over to get it. And but again, it's things like that where it was like an immediate. Well, like as soon as we realized that we didn't have an XLR cable, it was like, okay, so this is what we're gonna do. Like we're just gonna move on to these shots.
It's a good time though. It's a good time to make a couple notes. I would recommend a couple things that I always do are I have like a checklist. Whenever I pack my gear up, when I'm going out on location, I have a checklist and I make sure everything's there. And then of course, when I pack up and leave, I have a checklist.
You recheck,
and I make sure that I've actually packed everything, because my goodness, it's really easy to leave things behind. And then the second thing is that when it comes to cables, especially, I always have redundancy, because you just never know when a cable is either going to magically disappear and walk away, or stop working, or get a short, or who knows what. But when it comes to cables, I have at least two, and usually 3 or 4. If I need one, I have 2 or 3. If I need 3, I have 4 or 5. I always try to have extras of all that stuff, because it's inevitable
that something's going to happen.
Something's going to happen, and it's like, goodness grief, for a $15 cable, you don't want to stop, production. I mean, look, we're all under the gun on, budget, and none of us have infinite money, and even though they're cables, you need a lot of them, and it really does add up to thousands of dollars. But wherever absolutely possible, I definitely try to have redundancy.
Get as many,
And just a checklist. I mean, that doesn't cost you anything. That's a piece of paper,
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I have one, and I was checking them off, and I just
and sometimes
I guess it was just it was a very stupid, just misplaced. Like
it got lost in your mustache.
Like I had put one of them there, and then gone. Yeah, I just put that in the bag.
Your mustache ate it. Like, I think that's
yes, exactly. Yeah.
I just want to say, by the way, for
it's
the
probably
listener,
still in there right now.
It's probably still in. Oh my gosh, there it is. That's all. You've got like the most fantastic, like tombstone, like Val Kilmer mustache going on right now. It's so awesome. I think that's been kind of a running joke. I think I've mentioned that at least in a couple other episodes. And the only reason that I mention it and make fun of it is because I'm super jealous. I wish that I could grow a mustache like that. Awesome. I mean, any other stories from production? Because we still I want to save a little bit of time too to talk about some of your post work. So unless you've got,
I guess I could just one final thing I'll say is just that it was again that piece of advice. when we were doing the shoot at the house, the cottage shoot, which was 5 days, and we had, I think I wrote it down here, so we had 47 scenes to shoot in 5 days, the bulk of the movie to shoot, about an hour of screen time.
And that's, I just want to be clear,
days.
that's not setups, that's scenes.
Yeah,
so you
full
probably
scenes, yeah.
had hundreds of setups in 5 days.
And so the way that I
Wow.
kind of scheduled that out again was like, okay, we're doing everything in the kitchen today,
Yeah.
so that we can set up the lighting for the kitchen, and then, you know, it was very much a thing of like
Yeah.
making sure that everything was set, and because again we were living at the location too, so I couldn't just, you know, leave equipment out because we had to wake up in the morning and eat and get breakfast, and
Right.
you know, or people had to sleep in, you know, there were some people that were sleeping on a pull-out couch, and so it was like things like that, so I couldn't just leave everything set up, so I had to make sure that like, okay, this day this is our shoot location. So if you need to sit down or if you want to go get lunch or something, you can sit in the kitchen while we're shooting in the living room, or we're shooting upstairs. So everyone's going to kind of be downstairs. That's kind of going to be our home base for the day. And upstairs is going to be all set and lit for the day. But I also had in there an entirely empty day because there was one day where we had so many scenes there was the kitchen day scene. And it's like, so much of the movie takes place in the, like a lot of the large dialogue in the movie takes place in the kitchen. And so it was so much shooting, and we wound up getting to the end of the day where it was like the huge kind of big finale of the movie, and there's some effects work that has to go on, and we were all so tired. And it was very, very nice to just kind of look at the shot list, go like, oh, we still have like 6 pages of shots to do. Let's just do this on the redundancy day. Like, let's just push this to the reshoot day. And everyone just kind of like had a huge sigh of relief, and we were all able to just kind of sit down and get dinner and relax for the rest of the night.
So you had so much time that you were actually even able to say, you know what,
have a reshoot. Yeah,
we're going to quit early, and we've got a day where we can pick those up, and it's no skid. Yeah.
I will say every single shoot day went either ahead of schedule or exactly on schedule. There was never a point where we were behind, which was really, really nice.
I mean, and it really sounds like, I mean, again, I just want to reiterate, because I think it's not, I don't think that it is the first or even second or third or fourth or fifth thing that a lot of, you know, first time or even second or third time filmmakers think of is how much planning has to go into this. It's, you know, the glamorous part that we all kind of fantasize about is, you know, being on location and shooting and, you know, making magic in the moment right there, right? But, you know, putting together a production Bible, putting together detailed schedules, shot lists, you know, this stuff is sometimes forgotten, I think, in, you know, first-time filmmakers when they're getting things together. So kudos to you, man. Because I think that's a real testament to, you know, that's the payoff from that really detailed, extensive planning. So, I mean, and it sounded like you because we were talking before we started recording here, and you were telling me that you had, at least through a good chunk of the film, you were even putting together a rough cut as you went along. You had enough time to actually start to put in, you know, assemble a rough cut from the day shooting. So tell me a little bit, let's transition into post now. So you went into post-production with what, like half of the film or something?
I think I had about half an hour cut together.
Okay, so about a third then
and
of
so
the
there
film.
was about an hour that was shot at the cottage that I didn't have time to edit together during those shoots. But yeah, there was about a half hour cut together, and so I was very easily able to just kind of like edit those scenes that we shot and then plop them into the timeline and stuff like that. But you know, that's one thing about editing too, is that I'm doing it myself, which you know, many people would often like advise against or say, you know, you need. But the reason I'm doing it myself is kind of twofold. One of the reasons is because I kind of, when I'm even writing or when I'm shot listing, I'm already editing the movie. So I know exactly where cuts are going to take place. I know how scenes are going to be cut together during, you know,
You're watching the film in your head. Yeah,
exactly. And the second reason is that at this budget point, it's one of those things where it's like, you know, even I was paying an editor, you know, a few $1,000s to cut together my movie, it's still so low budget that you might not get a cutback for like months. You know, I know people who have been working on short films that are 5 minutes for the last 2 years because every time they send it off to an editor, and this isn't the fault of any editors, of course, they're going to prioritize larger paying jobs. But it's like every time they send it, it's like, you know, 3 months later they get it back.
It's the lowest priority.
For some people that works. It's like they like kind of taking the time off of seeing it. But for me, I don't like to not necessarily waste time, but like I like to, like Herzog says, have urgency.
You want to have a sense of urgency.
I like to
absolutely.
be able to sit down and cut it. And so there's definitely an issue sometimes of getting kind of lost in your own work, which can be very easy to have happen if you're, again, especially if you've written it, directed it, and are now editing it.
Yeah.
So my kind of tricks are, one is very, very simple, which is that actually when I cut together a scene, I flip the image, I mirror the image so that it's actually the opposite way, so everything's kind of backwards in the image. And what that sort of does is almost trick your brain into thinking that you're watching something new for the first time, and it can be way easier to kind of notice things that are weird, or when something doesn't cut together quite well, because it kind of removes you from the actual objectivity of it. And the second is I'll cut together something, and then I'll wait a week before watching it, so that I can at least kind of come away from it and not feel like my head's still in the sand.
Get some distance.
Yeah. And then the third is, obviously, this is quite obvious, but if you are editing something yourself that you've shot, it's vital to get secondary opinions and be able to send that off to people, and because at that point they are kind of the eyes that another editor would be. So like sending something off and saying, with a time code, and sort of saying like, hey, can you make sure that when you write notes, time code them, and sort of say like, at this point, cut that shot up 3 seconds longer, or something like that, or like this scene doesn't really, it feels jarring the way these two shots cut together, or this line doesn't work, cut that out. And so it can be really, that is, I think, the most important thing is getting as many secondary eyes on it as you can, and then being able to go back in. So I've had one cut so far, one full complete cut that I've sent out to people and gotten feedback on, and then now I'm basically going into, we had the big launch of our crowdfunding and our trailer and stuff like that, which kind of took a bit of time, but now I'm actually be able to sit down and kind of go into the second cut. After the second cut, I'll send it out again. Then I'll probably have a third cut, and I'm hoping the third cut will be pretty close to picture lock at that point, so that then I can get the composer and the sound mix actually underway. Neither of which I'm actually doing, which will be very nice to kind of be able to step back. For a second.
Who do you like to go to then? I agree. I think it's probably one of the more vital things you can do, or because I edit a lot of my own things as well for the same reasons that you just described yourself. And it is sometimes could be challenging to get some objectivity, especially for some, if you're having some difficulty with a section, or you're not quite sure how to solve a story issue or something. To get other eyes on it is vital. Who do you like to go to? Do you go to like some of your producers that are working with you on the film, or do you just go to like totally external random?
I try to kind of blend it. I kind of like, it's always, because in a state like this where the sound isn't like not even touched yet and it's very rough, I try to tend to stick to people who are like involved in films, so in the very least they can understand and sort of fill in those blanks and go like, I know that line won't be, it won't sound like that basically in the final thing. So I've shown it to most of the cast and crew, not the cast, sorry, just the crew, who I know very well, to kind of, again, give me notes. But then, I've had a few friends who were completely uninvolved in the project, haven't seen any footage, don't even know the script, don't know what the story's about, and I've shown them just to kind of get, again, a more general, like broad scope of what do they feel about the story, does it make sense, is everything clear?
Yeah.
And of course, what's really helpful for that is there's been points where they've sort of said, like, oh, that, I didn't really get that. And so I've said, well, in the final thing, there's actually going to be a sound effect there that sounds like that. Would that help that understanding? And they'll go, oh, yeah, I would totally have understood that way better if that sound effect was there. So it can be something as simple as that. Like there's a little bit with a whistle in the movie, and of course, none of the whistle sounds are in the movie yet. But I sort of asked afterwards, like, if you heard that sound there and then heard it then again later on in the film, would it make sense to connect those two things? And they go, oh, yeah, totally, easily. I would be able to connect that. So again, it can kind of help in that way of sort of being able to understand where is stuff sort of falling flat, or where is stuff getting confusing, but also at the same time, is the plan I already have in place, does it work? And,
that's important too, because I've definitely run into this on my on projects that I've been a part of, where sometimes people can have the story, they've sat with it themselves, especially like writer directors, where they've written the script, they've sat with it for a long time, they directed it themselves, and I mean the story is just it's been years inside their own brain. And so it's literally impossible for them to have objectivity about it. And they are kind of making connections in the story that actually aren't there. And I've kind of been asked to come on kind of after the fact, or I've worked in editing capacities like as an assistant or other things to come on and try to help draw all these connections, try to help put that back together, because it was kind of, they were starting to realize, holy crap, there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that people aren't actually picking up, but it wasn't kind of seen at the time because they're just kind of limited.
You're so involved with
limited
the story
objectivity.
As a writer. Yeah.
And you right, and it's like, to you it makes perfect sense. You're like,
yeah,
well, of
you
course.
know exactly what the intentions there are.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, well, of course this makes perfect sense. But then people, totally objective audiences start to see it, and they're like, I don't quite see how A and B are connected, or whatever it is, So,
and what can be great about like watching it with someone who's completely uninvolved, is seeing what moments they laugh at and what moments they get scared at and stuff, and being able to sit beside them watching it and sort of actually like kind of watch them watch it and sort of see, okay, so great, that bit worked, and they laughed there, so that's good, or like, oh, they got scared there, so that paid off, and
absolutely,
because again, it's very hard to like know if something that you're directing is scary, because of course you're directing it, or even funny. And so being able to actually sit down with another person who hasn't seen it and watch them, where they react, where they laugh, or if they don't at some point, can you rework something,
or if they do where they weren't supposed to?
Yes,
which can sometimes happen.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I want, if you don't mind, if you want to, please share with everybody the location of your crowdfunding site.
Yeah. So it's on Indiegogo. So if you look up Daylight Again on YouTube, or of course the trailer, because not the Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young song, but if you look up thriller film Daylight Again trailer, if you Google that or search it on YouTube, the link to the Indiegogo is actually in the description of that video.
Okay.
So it should be easy to find there. It's also, if you just look up Daylight Again on Indiegogo, it should be come up pretty easily.
Perfect.
But yeah.
Excellent. Well, Cullen, thanks so much for sharing some of your filmmaking experiences with Daylight Again with us. I hope that for those listening that's been informative. I always enjoy listening to other people's creative processes, how they make decisions. I still learn things to this day, all the time, of course. And so it's fun for me to listen to your process, Cullen. But excellent. Well, I can't wait. Down the road a little bit as you move through post, we can have another episode where we talk about your adventures in post, and then I'll be excited to see the film.
I'm excited to show you.
Yeah, excellent, fantastic. All right, awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We appreciate it. Until next time.
Bye-bye.